Hi, this is Gary with MACMOST.com. Let's talk about how iCloud works. So iCloud is Apple's cloud service that allows you to see the same files, photos, and other data across all of your Apple devices. It's designed to work seamlessly, so your files will just appear everywhere. You don't have to configure very much or do much work on your part to make this happen. Now, when you're talking about your files, the part of iCloud that deals with that is iCloud Drive. But there's also iCloud Photos that deals with the photos in your Photos library. And other apps like Notes, Reminders, Calendar, and so on use iCloud as well, so you see the same documents across all your devices. In my examples here, I'm going to talk mostly about iCloud Drive, but the same thing applies to those other services, particularly iCloud Photos. So when thinking about your files, this is how it typically works if you don't have iCloud or any other cloud service. You've got several devices, and let's say you create a file on each one of those. You only see the file you created on the device that you created it on. If you wanted to move a file to another device, like say move file A from your desktop Mac to your MacBook, you could do that. You can manually move it and place it there, but it would be a copy of that file. You would now have actually two different files, one on your desktop Mac, one on your MacBook. If you altered one, it wouldn't alter the other. So you would have to manually keep track of which file is the most current one and keep copying it back and forth as you update it. Now let's look at how this works with iCloud. With iCloud Drive, if you had these four files and then you turned iCloud Drive on for all of these devices, the first thing that would happen is each file from each device would sync with iCloud Drive, and then iCloud Drive would sync back to all your devices. So file A would exist across all four devices as well as being at iCloud Drive. Technically, you would have 5 copies of that, but you would never have to worry about that. It would appear as if you just have one copy of that file. So it's more useful to think of it this way, where each device actually has a window to iCloud Drive. You can see the files that's stored in iCloud Drive, but in fact, you are viewing the same files no matter which device you're looking on. So treat every file as if it's just one file, not copies of it on each device and on iCloud Drive. Treat iCloud Drive as if it's one single location that you could access from each of your devices. So let's look at some real-life examples of how this works. You're working on your desktop Mac and you update file B. What happens when you save that file is that file gets updated on iCloud Drive server, and then iCloud Drive then updates the file on all the devices. So everything is kept in sync. You don't need to do anything for this. You just open up file B on your Mac, you make a change, you save, everything else is taken care of for you. What about adding a new file? Well, that works in a similar way. Let's say while working on your iPad, you add file E. Then that file goes to iCloud Drive, and then from iCloud Drive, it syncs and appears on all of your devices. What about deleting a file? So say we're going to delete file A while working on your MacBook. This deletion will then sync to iCloud Drive where the file is also deleted. And then iCloud Drive will trigger all your other devices to delete that file as well. That file is now gone. It's not available on any of your devices. Remember, you're supposed to treat these files as if there's just one file in one location, iCloud Drive. So deleting that one file means that you'll see that it's gone everywhere. Now note that iCloud Drive has a failsafe for this. There is a recently deleted folder on iCloud Drive where this file would then be stored for 30 days. So as long as you don't go in there and say delete now, you have the chance to recover a file if you accidentally deleted it. Of course, if you're working on your Mac, you also will see this file in your trash and you can pull it back from there as well. By the way, if you find these videos valuable, consider joining the more than 2,000 others that support MacMost at Patreon. You get exclusive content, course discounts, and more. You can read about it at macmost.com/Patreon. But then what happens if you're not online? For instance, let's look at this situation where your iPad is offline. Let's say you're accessing file C on your iPad, but you're not connected. You're somewhere where you don't have Wi-Fi and your iPad is just not connected at all to the internet. So you access file C and you make a change to it. Now what happens is you have a new version of File C on your iPad, but your iPad has no way to communicate with Apple's iCloud servers to tell it that there has been a change, and thus there's no way for your other devices to know about this change. So File C on iCloud Drive and on your other devices is now out of date. It's the old version. So what happens now is when your iPad connects again to the server, it will then update iCloud Drive, and iCloud Drive will then update your other devices, and everything is put back into sync. So how iCloud Drive and iCloud Photos works depends on a single setting called the Optimize setting that is on your Mac. You would find this setting by going to System Settings and then go to iCloud and then go to Drive. And you'll see it here, Optimize Mac Storage. Now let's take a look at a situation with those same 4 devices. But in this case, your desktop Mac, where you have plenty of space on the internal drive, the Optimize feature is turned off. But your MacBook, where you have less space, a smaller internal drive, you've turned Optimize on iPadOS and iOS. Optimize is always on. That's just how it works. There is no option to turn Optimize off. What happens in this situation if, say, you have a lot of files on iCloud Drive and some of your devices just don't have enough storage for all those files? On your MacBook, where you have less space, File D has not been accessed in months, so it decides that it will offload File D. When you look, you'll see File D there, but it's like an empty envelope. The contents aren't there. And a similar thing's happening on your iPhone. There's even less space. So File D, but also File B is going to be offloaded. On the other hand, on your iPad, you have plenty of internal storage there. There's plenty of room for all the files. Now, what would happen if you were to try to access File D on your MacBook? Well, there's still some space on the drive. It's just trying to be cautious and making sure the drive's not filled up. So if you try to access File D, then it will actually load the contents from iCloud Drive and then open File D. Okay, so what I described is that iCloud Drive was making a decision for you based on how recently you accessed the file as to whether or not it was cached locally and available for immediate use without having to download from iCloud Drive. And that's true. For instance, here I'm looking at a list in the Finder of my files in my Documents folder, and I could see with this column turned on here, which is the iCloud status column, that I've got some files that are in iCloud but available right now. This is what that icon looks like. But I also have some files, like this one, where you see it has to download it. Just by clicking on that icon there, you could see that it downloaded that file. So it's ready for use. And this is handled automatically depending on how much space you have and how recently you accessed each file. In other words, how likely it is you'll be needing that file today. However, you can override this. If you control-click, right-click, or two-finger click on any file, you can decide to keep a file downloaded. In other words, override iCloud Drive and tell it, yes, this file is one I don't want you to get rid of. I always want to have a cached version of this file on this Mac. This is very useful if you think you might be offline with this Mac or other device. Then you know you'll have this file available. You can do the same thing in the Files app for the iPhone and the iPad. You can decide to have a file or, in fact, an entire folder as keep downloaded. And note that if the file is already downloaded now, I can also say remove the download now. So if you have a large file or a bunch of large files or a folder filled with large files and you want to clear off some space, you can use remove download to tell iCloud Drive to offload this file now and save the space on your local drive. So you do have the ability to manually override iCloud Drive's automatic caching of files. And of course, if you had Optimize turned off, then all of the files are always downloaded. So having Optimize turned off is ideal if you have plenty of space for all your files. Then you don't have to worry about this at all. So here are some answers to other questions people usually have about iCloud Drive. Can you store a file outside of iCloud Drive? And yes, absolutely you can. So before I showed all of the files in iCloud Drive and you saw them on all the devices, but it's more accurate to look at it this way. Each device has some local files and some iCloud Drive files. So on Macs, this is typically the folders in your home folder. You've got folders there like music, pictures, and movies, but you can create your own. For instance, I can go to my home folder here And I've created a folder here called local documents. You can name it something else like local projects or whatever. And I've put a bunch of files in here. These are all in my home folder, not in iCloud Drive, which means that they're local only. So in that situation, for instance, you may have, say, file X in your home folder on your desktop Mac. On your iPad, in the Files app, there's a section called On My iPad. And on your iPhone, it's called On My iPhone. This is where you would put local files that are not on iCloud Drive. So in this case, I've created a called File Y on my iPad that's local only, and one called File Z that's on my iPhone and local only. Notice you can't see these files across any of your other devices. They are just stored locally. So you lose all the advantages of iCloud Drive, but it could be useful in some situations. For instance, File X may be a huge video project that you just don't have room for, or the internet speed to sync it with iCloud Drive, so you're okay with that project only being on your desktop Mac and not being available anywhere else. How about the opposite? Can you store files on iCloud Drive but not have them local? Well, I already showed you this. If you've got Optimize turned on, say on your MacBook, you can have File D automatically not be taking up any space on your MacBook. You'll still see it there. As long as you don't try to access it, it's not going to try to download the content. And I showed you how to actually remove the download so that you can manually override iCloud Drive and say you don't want that file taking up any space locally. This is how you have a file stored on iCloud Drive only and not on your local device. So this relates to another question is, how does iCloud Drive save space? You may have been told to use iCloud Drive because you don't have enough local storage on your Mac. Well, this is the Optimize feature. So on the example desktop Mac here, Optimize is turned off, and all the files available on iCloud Drive are also cached locally on your Mac, and you're not saving any space at all. In this case, the for example files take up 400 megs of space, and that's exactly how much space they're taking up on the desktop Mac. But on the MacBook, one of the files has been offloaded either automatically or by using the Remove Download in the context menu, and you're saving 100 megs of space. And the same thing on your iPhone here. 2 files are actually offloaded there. So using the Optimize feature on your Mac, just toggling it on automatically saves you space. And one last question I want to address. Is iCloud a backup? Well, the answer is yes and no. There are many reasons you want to have a backup. 2 of them are if your device is lost or stolen or it breaks. And is iCloud Drive a backup in that case? And the answer is yes. You see, say your desktop Mac breaks or somebody steals it. Now you've lost all the files. Remember you had that file X in your home folder? And you also had a bunch of files on iCloud Drive. All of those are gone because the Mac is gone. However, you've got all the iCloud Drive files still stored on Apple's server in iCloud Drive. They're still there. In fact, you get a new Mac, you sign into iCloud, and then you look in iCloud Drive, you'll see those 4 files there. They'll actually restore back to your Mac if there's room. However, file X, the one that was stored locally, that no longer exists. It wasn't in iCloud. It only existed on that drive on the desktop Mac. So if it's lost, stolen, or it breaks, that file's gone forever, unless you use some other backup solution to make sure the file X was backed up. So yes, iCloud Drive is a backup and will help you in cases if your device is lost, stolen, or breaks, but only if the file that you want to recover happens to be on iCloud Drive, not just stored locally. Now, actually, far more common uses for backups are when a file gets accidentally deleted or you make a change to it that you didn't intend and change your mind. Well, if you delete a file that's in iCloud Drive, then remember you've got that little recently deleted folder. So it keeps files around for 30 days as long as you don't go in there and then manually delete them. So in a way, it does allow you to recover a file that's accidentally deleted. Not as well as Time Machine or a lot of online backup services would, which would keep the file, well, as long as the backup exists. So iCloud Drive is better than nothing for this. But in the case where you're making a change to a file, and then the next day you regret that change, and you want to roll back to the previous version, that's actually a really useful feature of Time Machine, but not of iCloud Drive. You can't roll back to yesterday's version. Some apps like Pages, Numbers, and Keynote actually have file revisions built in to the files, so you can do it for those. But for lots of other apps, you wouldn't be able to simply go back to yesterday's file. You could do that with Time Machine and a lot of online backup. So keep in mind, iCloud is technically not a good backup because it fails in letting you roll back changes, and it's very limited in how long you can recover a deleted file. But it's much better than nothing. If using another backup solution is very inconvenient for you, like you're a student that's always moving around with your MacBook, it's still much better to have that file stored in iCloud Drive than locally. Somebody steals your MacBook, you could lose your term paper. But if it was stored in iCloud Drive, you could just look in the Files app on your iPhone, and there's the file. So hopefully I've given you a better idea about how iCloud works and answered some of your questions about it. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, click the thumbs up button below to let me know. I publish new tutorials each weekday. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out.